This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Starting this Friday show is K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien with this week's grain market outlook. The market is currently in dynamic times and continues to be influenced by movements around the world. Rich Llewelyn, K-State Extension Assistant, continues today's show with information about two upcoming events. He shares details on the Risk and Profit Conference and Ag Lenders Conferences. Completing today's show is Chip Redmond, K-State meteorologist, as he reviews Kansas's very high temperatures and what the state can expect moving into next week. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Friday show as we normally do with a grain market update. And then for our grain market update this week, we have K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien. Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
Dan, before we started this and we were talking through the grain market, you mentioned it's very dynamic times. And are we seeing that with our futures?
Certainly are, and with regard to the changes in weather patterns, weather conditions for crops, yes, in Kansas, but beyond that into the central, eastern, northern corn belt, and you name it. We just have a lot of things domestic that are affecting domestic U.S. crop production potential. We have, for the most part, we have most of our hard red winter wheat crop in, but still struggling with issues up in the northern plains for white wheat, for hard red spring, for durum. Much less what we're seeing in terms of hot, dry conditions affecting corn, some of those critical time frames, but still having a big effect on the crop. Heading now into, for soybeans, the time of flowering. Again, a lot of the old standby viewpoints were that we make corn in July, we make soybeans in August, and without doubt, I know Chip Redmond in our house here at K-State has a lot to say about all of that in terms of hot, dry conditions. And so a lot of what I would have to say would work off of what our climatologists, people like Chip, would have to say too. So, and in response to that, so we moved into changing futures prices. Yesterday, on Thursday the 27th, corn closed at 533 and a quarter. Beast at new crop beast contract 542 and a quarter. Also, both those down 6 or 7 cents. But in the broader picture of where we've been moving for corn, we've been had traded down to about $4.70, as high as about $5.65 in the last 4 or 5 days, and are now at $5.33. And I guess from a price point of view, it's a welcome surprise. Quite often, if we'd had no problems with production in the United States for corn, we probably would have gone down below $5 and just stayed there. But now we have issues that we're wrestling with. So, and when you look for soybeans, pretty similar situation. You've got August closing at $15.32, and we're just about to enter into what we call the contract delivery time frame to close out that contract. Again, $15.32, September $14.53. November, just under $14. And in terms of price trends, we're seeing soybeans not having, I guess, just come up to previous highs, but we have now exceeded them. Previous highs going way back to January were about 15.20 or so, and now we've traded up as high as about over 15.75, have come down some off of that. So strong times in the soybean futures market, and I think the underlying issue there has to do with how the USDA had dropped in the end of June acreage report. It dropped soybean acres about 4 million acres and had raised corn about 2, and the reason we're seeing the soybean market in response to hot, dry conditions be so much more responsive than the corn market is just, again, we chopped acres so much. So that's a highly scientific university term, i.e. we chopped acres. But the USDA did drop acres that much for soybeans, and now it just exacerbates any bit of worry that we have in that. For us, as hard red winter wheat producers here in Kansas, we had so many problems all throughout this market here. At the farther west we had gone, and so now those that have wheat that we're blessed to be able to get a crop out are Did they sell at harvest? Have they held? If we're seeing now a jump up in wheat prices almost, to over 925 on the high end of trade, closed yesterday at 866.5. Again, it's no doubt a lot of what's going on is not just our worries about dryness up in the Dakotas. There's a spring wheat tour that's trying to assess all that right now, or has happened. But again, this whole issue overseas has the world market so worried about having adequacy of supplies, as Ukraine has now trouble shipping grain out. I touch on that, but Antonina Barriaca in our shop, I know you've talked with her as well, can and will talk about that in a lot more depth. So quite the times in these markets, and just a lot of volatility. And it's polite to say it's dynamic because it's in some of these markets there's enough potential for different things to happen that it's almost scary. I want to add one thing in. I don't often talk as much as I should have about grain sorghum, but grain sorghum exports have been really strong in recent weeks, finishing the marketing year, at least the pace that we see, very, very positively. So I think we start to see some of that as we look at the cash prices that we're seeing around the state.
And is that some of that dynamic movements that we're seeing in the market potential because it's a weather-dependent one also, something we've talked a lot about in the past?
Especially for the feed grains. What movement we see in the feed grains, a lot of that's mainly because of weather. What we see in in soybeans, that's weather on reduced acreage. So I would say when you look at cash prices, it's interesting that we've seen in our bellwether markets the corn price and say in Garden City with a basis of $1 over the futures, a cash basis at 633, new crop bids 572, 30 cents over, and we see pretty good prices around the rest of the state. Again, Columbus 618, Colby 613, about $6 in Topeka, about so in Hutchinson, about 568 in Salina. So we see some pretty good corn prices. You do see for grain sorghum prices, especially now as we've got these bids coming in, strongest positive basis actually is in Columbus, 30 over 563. In the export oriented areas, you've got Topeka showing up pretty well at 25 over, but really everywhere with a positive cash basis for grain sorghum. So we start looking at how strong export numbers for sorghum affect the market. Well, we look at the cash basis, see if it's showing the strength, and those numbers are positive right now. I would say for soybeans, all soybean prices, and here we're almost at the end of July, a new crop coming on, and we're looking at across the state at these areas we cover, top prices over $14. So that's just indicative of the type of challenge and worry that people have in those markets. And for wheat, we're seeing prices uniformly at the main markets that we're following. On the low side, 811 out in Colby, to the high side, 856 in both Salina and Hutchinson. So again, pretty strong wheat prices, and really the issue there is, as we get talking about wheat, is who has it to sell. That's the issue. It won't be long now. We're at the end of July, just about the end of August. Give us 1 or 2 months. We'll be thinking about answering the question of gosh, do we have moisture to go forward and seed wheat in the fall? So that as you and I talk in 30 days, that'll be the next topic for the wheat market that we'll be discussing.
And Dan, you've recently written some articles for AgManager, and you want to kind of talk about them today. They kind of give a version for domestic markets, but also international markets. And so first focusing that conversation in on corn.
On the domestic side, we're heading into the August report, and we will get a new measure of what the USDA NASS thinks or is forecasting for yields. We had dropped those numbers from 181.5 in the May, June, or projections down to 177.5 on U.S. yields in the July numbers. Will we stay at that number? Will we drop to 175, 174, something like that? Again, it's not so much what I say, but what, as we mentioned earlier, what Chip Redmond is forecasting that really affects that crop. So right now, it's a weather-driven situation. If that happens, think about corn. We have, again, high enough acres that we would have to get below 173, 174 thereabouts to really get below 2 billion bushels carry out. And we need probably get to to 2 billion or below to really see things tighten up, and that hasn't happened. That seems to be challenging at least at this time, unless the hot, dry conditions just continue and pervade. I would say for soybeans, that's, as we mentioned earlier, we're now heading into August, just about on the verge of August starting, and the USDA projected 52 bushels per acre yields on tighter acres. And if we stay hot and dry, we start coming off 52 bushels an acre down to 50 and a half, down to 49 or something less, then in essence, it's not difficult with lower acres to see us getting down to about 100 million bushels or so, and things really tightening up. So we have the potential to see all that much more volatility in the soybean market, and that's what the prices are showing. And I'd say for wheat, our pervading issue is, again, how tight do things have to get overseas for U.S. wheat exports to actually start up again? And that's kind of an open question. I think in coming weeks, we'll continue to watch for that answer.
So overall, kind of right now, just waiting to see what's happening. And through the weeks, we'll just gain more and more information.
Yeah, it's the production season. We're determining supplies right now, and particularly for corn and for soybeans and for the northern crops for wheat. And we're all trying to gauge how much through those supply demand balance sheets, how much we end up for ending stocks. How tight will things get? And then whatever we have left or we think we'll have left, we'll gauge prices accordingly. And for soybeans or for wheat, if things get tight from the northern states, then if prices move up to ration demand, so we don't get too tight here domestically. That's the way I kind of piece this together.
Dan, I appreciate you joining us today and giving us our grain market update.
Thank you very much, Shelby. I appreciate it.
That was K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien. I will link his articles from AgManager.info in today's show notes, which you can find on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. Tuned back into Agriculture Today, and we continue our show now discussing some upcoming conferences. We have the Risk and Profit Conference and the Ag Lenders Conference coming up soon in August and September. And then to talk about it, we have K-State Extension Assistant Rich Llewelyn. Rich, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So 2 conferences to talk about today, but first, starting on this Risk and Profit Conference, that's taking place August 17th and 18th in person, however, again taking place August 21st through the 25th online. And so before we really get more into the schedule and people who are going to be there, could you share about what is the Risk and Profit Conference?
Well, this has been going on. I think it's the 28th year that we've been doing it now, and we have it in August. It's primarily for producers as well as ag lenders is the main group that shows up, but it's also for other folks that are involved in agriculture. And it gives our faculty a chance to present some of their current and up-to-date research that's going on, and also to spend some time with folks that are out in the state and involved in production and marketing and stuff and learn from them.
And quite an extensive list of people presenting there, so people able to gain quite a bit of knowledge.
Yeah, we have about 20 faculty that will be presenting different topics in the breakout sessions, and then we also have a grain and livestock market outlook that will be happening. And then we have a keynote speaker on Thursday from Washington, D.C. He works with AgriPulse Communications and is quite tied in with what's going on for policy there, and with the Farm Bill coming up, that's really a helpful thing.
And so keynote speaker Philip Brasher there from AgriPulse Communications coming in to talk about a Washington take on farm and rural policy issues. However, a lot of other interesting topics. We have policy and, of course, many things we've talked about here on Ag Today, the Farm Bill.
Yeah, that's probably the main thing going on. There's a lot of other topics, too, we have, but if there's a theme here, it's ag policy and the Farm Bill. We don't know much about what's going to happen with that yet. It's looking like it'll probably have an extension on the current bill, and they'll keep working it out, but we'll find out more from Philip there because he does know a little more than what we do. In addition to that, we have some stuff on land values and other conservation programs and stuff that's going on.
And another speaker who will be joining you at this Risk and Profit Conference, Robin Reed, who is an ag economist here at Kansas State University, talking about foreign land ownership.
She is, and she has some really interesting things. There's been quite a bit of discussion about that in the legislature and in the press. about foreign land ownership. It turns out in Kansas we don't have much for Chinese ownership, but a lot of the foreign ownership is actually related to the wind power and wind leases.
A lot of information from a lot of different presenters happening at this Risk and Profit conference. And you mentioned earlier that Philip will be starting his conversation around noon on Thursday. And so would you mind giving us kind of a rundown of what this 2-day schedule looks like for this conference here in Manhattan?
Well, we start with that lunch on Thursday on the 17th, and Philip will speak after lunch in a general session, and we have 4 breakout sessions in the afternoon. Folks, if they come both days, can attend a total of 7 of the breakout sessions. We have 19 different topics that are presented, and so they can get a pretty good sampling of what's going on there. So we'll have that. And then in the evening, we have a conversation with a Kansas farmer. And this year we have Norman and Cindy Roth from Sterling, Kansas, who will be coming in and sharing some about what's worked in their operation, what they've learned. And a lot of times that's really helpful for folks just to hear what other people have been trying and doing and stuff. So that's Thursday. And then on Friday, we start with the grain market outlook from Dan O'Brien. He's our grain marketing specialist here in the state. And so he has an hour there with the major grain markets in Kansas. And then we have 3 more breakout sessions. And then we end with lunch, followed by the livestock market outlook with Glenn Tonser, who's our livestock guy here.
And the in-person session of this is taking place at the K-State Alumni Center, August 17th and the 18th. However, there's another option because producers might not be able to get away from their operation right now.
Right. And so what we have is the folks that attend in person will also have access to the online meetings, so they theoretically could probably catch, almost all of the breakout sessions. We'll have 10 of those happening the following week, 2 at a time each day at noon from Monday through Friday, the 21st to the 25th. And so each of those will be 45 minutes and give an opportunity for folks to hear what's going on with those sessions and ask questions too.
You mentioned that a lot of the people who attend are farmers and ag lenders and maybe other farmers and ag lenders who haven't attended this conference before. Why would you encourage them to come?
Well, it's some of our latest research that we have going on in the department, and it's applied research. It's not too highfalutin and over their heads, but it's stuff they can actually use and take back home. And so that's one of the real important things is related to policy, yes, but also a lot of other topics, just grazing management and impacts of grazing cattle on sustainability and the environment, international grain markets, farm income tax updates. There's just a lot of practical stuff that folks can use.
And Rich, a lot of different presenters coming in and sharing knowledgeable information with attendees. However, I am assuming that the people who are there will have the opportunity to ask questions.
Yes, it's 50-minute sessions, and we encourage the speakers to take about 35, 40 minutes and allow at least 10 minutes for questions at the end. Plus, during the times between sessions and at meals, they have a chance to sit and talk, and that's one of the really cool things about it. We missed that during COVID, but it's nice to be back in person now and have that going on.
And for people who are thinking of attending this conference, what are the fees?
For both days in person, it's $235, or we have a one-day option for $185 for either of the days. The online edition is $50, and that includes recordings of the general sessions from the in-person meetings as well as the 10 online live sessions.
And if people attended the in-person meetings and paid for it, they automatically have access to the online ones?
Yes, they do.
Where can people find out more information about this?
The AgManager.info website is where we have everything posted on that, or folks could send an email to me at rvl@ksu.edu. That's RV as in Victor, L at ksu.edu.
And Rich, one more thing for us to mention is with this registration fee, there is a reduced price if you get it done before a certain date, correct?
Right, and so that closes on August 12th, about a week before the conference, and after that it goes up $25, so it would be $260 for the in-person both days.
So go ahead and make those decisions. And another conference that's upcoming, maybe a little bit more ways out, but could go ahead and get put on the calendars, is the Ag Lenders Conference. And so what is that conference, Rich?
Well, as its name implies, mostly for ag lenders, although we do have farmers and other folks, crop insurance agents who attend that. But it's an update for the lenders community here in Kansas with some of the hot topics that are going on. A few are the same as what we have for risk and profit. But we also have some other things going on like the macroeconomy and interest rates with Brian Brigham, kind of looking at what's happening there. We also have the grain and livestock market outlooks, and Robin will also be looking at the foreign land ownership for the bankers this time. But it's just a one-day conference, so it's taking place the end of September, and it lets the bankers get together and, again, talk with each other and learn from each other as well as some of the material we have.
And these are one-day conferences. However, there are multiple one-day conferences.
Right. There's two of them going on. One's in Garden City on September 26th. And then the next day, on September 27th, we have it here in Manhattan at the Alumni Center. And so it's the same program both days. And then we also have a live stream from Manhattan on the 27th. So if someone can't attend in person, they'd be able to get online and watch it as it's going on from Manhattan.
And these days have the same schedule, which you can find on AgManager.info. Those days starting at 8:30 a.m. And so what is the registration process like for this event?
Well, they can pre-register. We also do take walk-ins for both these conferences, and so folks could just show up if it rained the night before and they decided to go ahead and come on in. But we do have the pre-registration, and then when they show up, for this one, start at 8:30 in the morning with the registration and some coffee and donuts, and then the sessions start at 9 a.m., go till noon. We'll have lunch, and then after lunch, we have a couple more sessions, and we'll wrap it up.
For people who are thinking of attending both of these conferences, Rich, what do you really want them to walk out of that building with and take home with them?
Well, just understanding of what's going on in the markets and with ag policy is kind of the emphasis this year, but some practical things that they can take home to their operation and tailor to their situation, whether they're farming or whether, for bankers or crop insurance agents, stuff that they can take back and pass on to clients. We really like being able to leverage that we're actually affecting more people than just the folks who attend.
Rich, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and discussing the Risk and Profit Conference as well as the Ag Lenders Conference.
Well, I appreciate you having me. Thanks.
That was K-State Extension Assistant Rich Llewelyn. The Risk and Profit Conference is taking place August 17th through the 18th in Manhattan and will be online August 21st through the 25th. The Ag Lenders Conference will first be in Garden City September 26th and will then be in Manhattan, Kansas September 27th and will also be live streamed. You can find out more information about these events by going to AgManager.info or emailing Rich at rvl@ksu.edu. I'll link these in today's show notes, which you can find on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Friday show with some weather information. And then to give it to us today, we have Key State meteorologist Chip Redmond. Chip, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Across Kansas, many people have been feeling it. It's been kind of toasty outside.
Kind of toasty is putting it lightly, I think, especially considering the conditions we've seen over the last few weeks where we've been at below normal. Much of central Kansas Much of Kansas really is several degrees below normal for the month temperature-wise, and both in high and low temperatures. So the last couple of days have been a shocker to the system. We jumped up pretty quickly. We've had highs everywhere in the state. It's 100 for the most part, and we've seen them reach as high as 105, 106 degrees in north central Kansas. So really, really hot conditions. And the impact's been increased quite a bit by the fact that we're just not cooling off very much at night, with low temperatures still staying in the upper 70s to low 80s. So that's about 10 degrees above normal even at night. And it's really hard for people and animals to recover with those warm temperatures at night, which really increases the compounded stress of multiple days of 100-plus degrees.
And talking about with the heat, though, we haven't really seen any precipitation.
Yeah, we've had a high pressure build in. It is the high pressure that was over the Southwest, expanded further north and east, and Southwest has been in the news quite a bit for 30-plus days of 100-degree heat, Phoenix and El Paso. And so that heat's obviously been moderated somewhat, but it's expanded further north and east. And as that high pressure builds in with that heat, then it is typically dry. Because if we get precipitation, then we get cloud cover and we cool things off. So we unfortunately have been dry, and it's a bad combination when you get heat and dry like this.
Which that combination hasn't really supported the drought monitor at all.
Keep in mind that the last few days of heat have not been considered in the current drought monitor. The drought monitor that came out on Thursday brought actually some pretty impressive changes to southwest Kansas. We expanded the drought-free area, not quite double, but very close to it in the state, all in that southwest corner where they had heavy rain last week. The drought monitor cutoff is Tuesday morning, and so that's about when we started seeing the heat. And as we move forward with these warm, dry conditions, likely not going to see any improvements next week on the drought monitor, that's for sure. And we flipped that switch pretty hard.
And so this combination of heat and really no rain, creating stress for people and crops and everything involved with agriculture.
Yeah, I get kind of concerned when we've been fairly above normal precipitation and below normal temperatures. The crops just aren't adjusted to it either, and neither is their root systems. We're kind of getting to the grain filling time for corn, and it needs some moisture. It likes heat and humidity, but it needs some moisture to keep up with it. And when you look at the grasses, too, are already starting to transition, especially the cool season grasses are starting to cure out and brown out. The sign that stress is increasing pretty quickly. With 100-degree heat, doesn't take long. And then we factor in the wind. We've had breezy conditions over the last few days, and that really helps dry the surface and the vegetation out and increases ET demand. So not a good combination when we look at trying to alleviate any stress in time that's peak growing season in Kansas.
Chip, as we look forward, are we really going to see a break in this unfavorable combination?
Well, it is the middle of summer, and so if we're going to get heat, this is the time of the year I suppose we will get it. And looking forward, we're going to have a brief break in the heat this weekend with maybe a few isolated showers and storms, mostly in northwest Kansas. And then the heat bounces right back on Monday and looks to like mid to late next week. We might see another break with maybe some more precipitation chances in the northwest. But other than that, it'll be mostly dry for a majority of the state, and 100-degree temperatures are going to be fairly common.
And I feel like with these high temperatures, it's a great time to mention that K-State does have a tool to help producers look at animal comfort care and what it's looking like in the future. So where could they find that?
Yeah, you can find that on the Mesonet website. If you go to mesonet.ksu.edu, go to that menu in the top left. There's 3 bars there. Click agriculture and then animal comfort, and you can select both current conditions and the forecast. And you can see in the forecast there's multiple days of heat danger across the state.
Chip, I appreciate you joining us today and giving us a weather update.
Yep, thanks for having me.
That was Kansas State University meteorologist Chip Redmond. I'll link the Mesonet's website in today's show notes, which you can find on agtoday.net. That's all we have for you this Friday on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with you on Monday.